The vampire king saw his employee crying at his son's grave. What he discovered shocked him. The night was heavy with mist, curling around the gravestones like ghostly fingers. The moon hung low and pale, casting a cold silver light over the cemetery. Silence reigned, broken only by the soft sound of a woman's quiet sobs. She knelt before a small grave, hands trembling as she clutched a delicate silver locket. Her name was Ilara, a loyal caretaker and quiet presence within the grand castle of the vampire king. Tonight, however, she was not a servant. Tonight she was a mourner. The grave she visited was simple, adorned only with fresh flowers she had placed herself. It belonged to the king's young son, a boy whose life had ended too soon, whose laughter and bright eyes now lived only in memory. Alara's chest tightened with every heartbeat. She did not belong here, not truly, but grief had no concern for rules or fear. A shadow fell across the grave. Alara stiffened, her hand gripping the locket tighter. She was not expecting anyone, and yet she did not rise. "You should not be here," a deep voice said, calm but edged with authority. Alara looked up and froze. Standing before her was the vampire king himself, Valerian, his presence as commanding as the dark walls of his castle. His tall frame was cloaked in midnight robes that seemed to drink in the moonlight, and his eyes, deep and crimson, held both power and curiosity. I did not mean to intrude," Alara whispered, bowing slightly. Her voice wavered under his gaze, but there was no fear, only sorrow. Valerian's expression softened just slightly, though his eyes still searched her face. He had seen countless people enter his castle and his lands, but few had dared to approach the grave of his son. Fewer still had dared to kneel there and weep. "You cry for him," he said, his voice low, almost a growl. "Why?" Alara's throat tightened. She hesitated, then whispered, "Because he deserved more, because he was loved." She lifted the silver locket, revealing a small photograph inside, a boy's bright smile frozen in time. Valerian's eyes narrowed. That locket, it had belonged to his son. How had it come into her possession? Questions stirred, sharp and uneasy. "You had this?" he asked, his voice steady, though his pulse quickened. Alara lowered her eyes. I kept it safe," she said softly. "I promised him I would." The king's heart tightened at her words. He had been absent when his son had needed him most, caught in the endless duties of his throne, the weight of his immortality and kingdom pressing down. Yet, here was someone who had watched over his son, silently, faithfully. Someone who had kept a promise he himself had failed to uphold. Valerian took a cautious step closer. The mist curled around his boots, and the cold night air seemed to bend in deference to his presence. "Who are you to him?" he demanded, though his tone was more curious than angry. Alara lifted her gaze, her eyes glistening with tears met his. There was no falsehood there, only truth and grief. I was his friend," she said. "I promised to protect him when others could not." Valerian felt a strange ache in his chest, a mix of awe, sorrow, and something he could not name. He had ruled these lands for centuries, had commanded armies, dealt with betrayals, and faced curses that would have shattered mortals. Yet here, kneeling in the mist with her, holding a boy's memory, he felt powerless. "Why did you not tell me?" he asked, almost to himself. Alara shook her head. You had your kingdom, you had your battles. I only wanted him safe." Her voice was steady, but a sob escaped despite her effort. "And now he is gone." Valerian's hand twitched at his side. He wanted to demand answers, to know every detail, to punish and protect at once, but he could not move. Not yet. He simply watched, torn between rage at the world and gratitude toward this woman who had honored his son's life when he had failed. The wind whispered through the gravestones, carrying with it a scent of something old and sorrowful. Valerian's senses, sharp as they were for a vampire, detected movement, someone or something, slipping silently behind the line of graves. He stiffened, instinct and authority taking hold. "Ilara," he said quietly, "stay close. Do not move." Her eyes widened, but she obeyed, stepping nearer to him. He noticed the trembling in her hands and the way her courage seemed tempered by fear. Yet she did not run. That alone intrigued him. From the corner of his vision, Valerian saw it again, a dark figure moving among the gravestones with unnatural grace. His instincts flared. Whoever it was, they did not belong here, and whatever they sought, it was not something living. "Who is it?" Alara whispered, clutching the locket as if it were a shield. "I do not know," he admitted, his crimson eyes fixed on the shadow, "but it is close." The figure paused, and for a brief moment moonlight caught the glint of its eyes, silver, cold, and calculating. Then it vanished into the mist. Valerian's jaw tightened. "They know this place," he muttered. "They know about him." His fists clenched at his sides. Alara's voice was barely a whisper. "About him?" Valerian took a deep breath, forcing himself to regain control. "Yes." "About your charge about my son." The words felt heavy on his tongue. "We must find out who dares to meddle here." Alara nodded, her fingers tightening around the locket. I will help you," she said. Her voice was soft but resolute. "I know things, small things, that might lead you to the truth." For the first time in many nights, Valerian felt something he had long thought impossible: trust, and unexpectedly hope. "Very well," he said, his voice low, commanding. "We will uncover this together." A cold gust of wind swept through the cemetery, rustling the flowers on the grave. The mist thickened, curling around their feet like living tendrils. Valerian glanced down at the locket in Alara's hand once more. That small, delicate object held more than a memory. It held a secret, a key to understanding what had truly happened to his son. He felt a pull, strange and unwelcome, tugging at his ancient heart. This woman, so quiet and brave, so devoted to someone who was gone, was somehow entwined with his past and his future. "Alara," he said, his voice almost unrecognizable to him in its softness, "tell me everything. Do not leave anything out." She took a deep breath, steadying herself. "It will take time," she said, "but you deserve to know. He was more than you knew, and there are forces at work that are still here, even now." Valerian's eyes narrowed. "Forces," she nodded, "dark forces, curses that linger. And someone who wishes your family harm. That is why your son, why—" Her voice broke again, but she quickly composed herself. "I will tell you all if you promise to listen." The Vampire King studied her, searching her face for any trace of deception. There was none. Only grief, loyalty, and courage. He made his decision. "Speak," he commanded. "Begin at the beginning." Alara swallowed, then began to speak. She told him of the boy's laughter, the small victories she had witnessed, the moments of joy she had preserved in secret. She told him of the threats that had crept into their lives, shadows that he had never seen, curses that lingered like poison in the air. Valerian listened, silent and intent, each revelation like a dagger and a balm all at once. He had been a king, feared and immortal, but he had never felt the sting of helplessness like this. He had never felt it so personally. The night deepened, and the mist grew thick, curling around them as if the world itself was holding its breath. The grave of his son stood between them, simple and quiet, yet heavy with meaning. And Valerian realized that the true journey had only just begun. Someone had tampered with fate. Someone had used grief as a weapon. And the woman kneeling before his son's grave, Alara, was the first person brave enough to confront it. Valerian's heart, long thought frozen, beat with an unfamiliar warmth. He did not yet know the extent of the danger, nor the depth of the secrets she carried. But he knew one thing with certainty. He could not face this night alone. As they stood together, the mist swirling at their feet, Valerian saw it, a faint shimmer among the gravestones, a shadow that moved with unnatural intent. His hand went instinctively to the dagger at his side, his senses alert. "Alara," he said, voice low, "do not look away. Whatever comes next, we face it together." She nodded, her eyes reflecting the pale moonlight, and for the first time the cemetery did not feel quite so lonely. And in the shadows, unseen, someone, or something, watched them, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The night was far from over, and the secrets of the past had only begun to stir. The castle loomed against the night sky, its towering spires piercing the clouds. Inside, the halls were dim, lit only by flickering torches that cast long, dancing shadows along the stone walls. The air was heavy with the scent of aged wood and candle wax, mixed with something older, something almost alive. Valerian led Alara through the corridors, his presence commanding, yet his mind restless. "Why did you never speak of this before?" he asked, his voice low, echoing slightly in the high hallway. His crimson eyes reflected both curiosity and the weight of his grief. Alara's fingers tightened around the silver locket. "I was afraid," she admitted softly. "Not of you, but of what could happen if anyone knew the truth. I wanted him safe. That was all that mattered." Valerian's jaw tightened. His son had been left vulnerable, even as shadows crept around him. Anger flared, but it mingled with an unfamiliar ache. He had failed in ways he could never fully forgive himself for. Yet here was Alara, small and mortal in comparison to him, who had carried the boy's memory with unwavering devotion. They entered a chamber hidden deep within the castle, a room few had ever seen. It was lined with shelves filled with ancient tomes, jars containing strange herbs and crystals that glowed faintly in the dark. Magic, both light and dark, thrummed in the air. Valerian's eyes scanned the room, assessing it with instinct honed over centuries. "This is where the truth may begin," Alara said, her voice hushed. "I have kept records, notes, and fragments of what happened. I thought it would help someone understand, if they were ever ready." Valerian's gaze softened, and for a moment he saw her not as a subordinate or caretaker, but as something rare, a companion in grief, someone who could walk beside him through shadow and sorrow. "Show me," he commanded. Alara opened a leather-bound journal, its pages worn and marked with delicate handwriting. She spoke softly, recounting the boy's final days, the laughter he had shared with her in secret, the small victories that seemed insignificant to the world, and the moments when dark forces had threatened him. "There was a curse," she said, tracing her fingers over a page. "Something ancient, tied to the royal line. I sensed it long before it claimed him. I tried to shield him, to keep it from finding him, but—" Her voice faltered, and her eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I could not save him completely." Valerian's hands curled into fists at his sides. The weight of centuries of power and control had never felt so meaningless. He had been the vampire king, feared and respected across kingdoms. Yet here, in a quiet chamber with a mortal woman, he felt powerless, as if all his strength had been stripped away by grief. He moved closer to the journal, peering at the faded sketches and cryptic symbols. "This curse, could it still linger?" he asked, the edge of concern threading his words. Alara nodded. "I do not know. That is why I came tonight. Something is moving again, something that should have remained buried." Valerian's eyes narrowed. Shadows in the castle had always been expected. After all, darkness was his domain. But these shadows, they whispered of danger, of secrets yet untold. Someone had orchestrated his son's death. Someone or something was not finished. Alara's gaze met his, steady despite the fear she did not voice. "There are forces at work," she said, her tone urgent but calm. "And they may not be human. They may seek power or revenge or something I cannot yet name, but I know they are here." Valerian's pulse quickened, a mixture of fear and anticipation stirring within him. "Then we find them," he said. "We uncover the truth, and we make them pay for what they did." Alara hesitated, then placed a hand lightly on his arm. "It will not be easy," she warned. "They are clever and they are patient, and you cannot face this alone." Valerian studied her, the weight of his centuries pressing against the fragile hope she offered. He had ruled with iron, feared without mercy, and yet now he felt a spark he had not known in decades. Trust, and something more, a warmth that prickled at the edges of his immortality. Then we do this together, he said finally, his voice firm. No shadows will hide from us. For hours, they pored over the journal and the tomes in the chamber. Alara explained the symbols she had discovered, fragments of rituals that might commune with spirits, and signs of the curse's lingering power. Valerian listened, learning, questioning, and occasionally murmuring in languages long forgotten. At one point, the air shifted. The room grew colder and a faint whisper seemed to echo through the stone walls. Both froze. Alara, Valerian said, his voice a low growl. Do you hear that? She nodded, her grip on the locket tightening. Yes, it's him or someone connected to him. Something is here. A chill ran down Valerian's spine. He had faced monsters, betrayals, and dark sorcery, yet the weight of grief made this moment sharper, more poignant. This was not just power or battle, it was personal. His son had been taken, and now the threads of that loss were entwined with the living world once more. We must act, Valerian said, rising. His eyes glowed faintly crimson, reflecting both anger and purpose. We start with a ritual to reach his spirit. We must know what he endured and who is responsible. Alara hesitated. The ritual, it is dangerous. It may reveal more than we can control. Valerian's gaze softened. I have faced death and darkness countless times, he said quietly. But I will not face this alone, not with him, not with you. We do this together. They moved to the center of the chamber, arranging candles in a circle, ancient symbols etched carefully into the stone floor. The air thrummed with energy, thick and electric, as Alara began to chant softly, reading from the journal. Valerian joined, his voice deep and resonant, blending with hers in a rhythm that seemed to awaken the very stones beneath them. The circle glowed, faint at first, then brighter, until the room seemed bathed in an otherworldly light. Shadows twisted along the walls and the whispers grew louder. Then suddenly a child's voice pierced the room. Mother, father, Alara froze, her eyes wide. It's him, she whispered. Valerian felt a sharp tug in his chest, a mixture of relief and sorrow. He stepped closer to the circle, though the light cast eerie shadows across his face. Speak, he said, his voice gentle, almost pleading. Tell me what happened. The voice trembled, sorrowful and distant. I was afraid, it said. I did not understand, and then the darkness came. Valerian's hands clenched. The boy had faced fear alone, hidden from the world, and Alara had been his shield. Yet even together they could not prevent the inevitable. Alara's tears fell freely now, but she did not break her chant. I am here, she whispered. I kept you safe. I tried to. The light in the circle pulsed violently, and a shadowy figure appeared at the edge of the glow. Its presence was unnatural, twisting the light and air around it. Valerian's instincts flared. This was the one who had manipulated events, who had allowed his son to be lost. You, he growled, his voice resonating with centuries of authority. Reveal yourself. The figure hesitated, then laughed, a cold, echoing sound that made the candles flicker. You are too late, it said. The boy's death was only the beginning. He is not the first, and he will not be the last if you interfere. Valerian stepped forward, his presence imposing. No more shadows will touch my family, he said, his voice low and dangerous. We will uncover everything. You cannot hide. The figure vanished as suddenly as it had appeared, leaving a chill in the room and a trail of whispering darkness that seemed to echo through the halls. Alara shivered but remained steadfast. It knows we are here, she said softly, and it will come again. Valerian placed a hand on her shoulder, a gesture of both protection and connection. Then we will be ready, he said, together. For a long moment they stood in silence, the weight of the night pressing in around them. Outside, the castle was still, but the air hinted at movement, an unseen presence waiting, watching, and planning. Alara finally spoke, her voice small but determined. I wanted to tell you sooner, but I feared the truth would break you. Valerian's crimson eyes softened. The truth has already broken me, he said quietly, but now I have you, and we will face it, whatever comes next together. The circle's light faded slowly, leaving only the faint glow of the candles. Yet in the shadows beyond, the figure's gaze lingered, unseen but not gone. The night was far from over. Secrets still waited to be uncovered, curses still stirred in hidden corners of the castle, and the path ahead was dangerous. But for the first time since his son's death, Valerian felt something he had thought impossible: hope. And with Alara at his side, he knew he would not face the coming darkness alone. The forest outside the castle was thick with mist, and the trees seemed taller and darker than any natural woods. Their twisted branches reached toward the sky like the arms of long-forgotten spirits, and the air smelled of damp earth and moss. Valerian led the way, his senses sharp, alert to every sound: the rustle of leaves, the whisper of wind, even the faintest snap of a twig. Alara followed closely, her heart racing though she tried to appear calm. The forest was alive in a way that made her skin tingle. Every shadow seemed to watch them, every rustle seemed to carry a secret. Yet she did not falter. She had promised herself she would stand by the Vampire King and by his son's memory no matter what lay ahead. "This forest," she whispered, breaking the tense silence, "is older than the castle. The curse lingers here. This is where I first sensed the shadow moving toward him." Valerian's crimson eyes scanned the trees. "I trust your instincts," he said quietly. "Lead the way." They walked in silence, save for the occasional soft whisper from Alara, as she pointed out subtle signs: broken branches, footprints that vanished into thin air, and strange symbols carved into the trunks. Each clue told them that the enemy they sought was clever and patient, weaving traps and hiding in plain sight. Suddenly, a low, cold wind swept through the forest, extinguishing the small lanterns Alara carried. Darkness enveloped them, thick and suffocating. Valerian's hand went instinctively to the dagger at his belt, and his eyes glowed faintly in the gloom. "Stay close," he ordered. "Do not speak unless I tell you to." Alara nodded, gripping the locket tightly. The silver felt warm in her hand, almost alive. She had carried it this far through shadow and grief, and now it seemed to hum with a quiet energy. A whisper floated on the wind, soft and sorrowful. "Alara, Valerian." Alara froze. "It's him," she breathed. "It's my charge, your son. He's near." Valerian's jaw tightened. "Then we must be ready," he said, his voice low and controlled. "He will lead us or warn us, but we must face whatever waits beyond." The path narrowed, and the mist thickened until their vision was reduced to a few feet. The ground beneath them was uneven, roots curling like snakes, ready to trip the unwary. Every step was cautious, deliberate, as if the forest itself were alive and testing them. Then ahead a figure emerged from the mist, a boy, translucent and glowing faintly, as if made of moonlight and memory. Valerian's heart clenched at the sight. His son alive in some form, but changed, fragile yet luminous. "Father," the boy whispered, his voice distant but clear. They are still here." Valerian's eyes softened, and for the first time in centuries he knelt to the boy's level. "I will protect you," he said, his voice trembling despite his control. "Tell me what happened." "Who is behind this?" The boy's eyes flickered toward the trees. "The shadow, the one who took me, is stronger than you think. It feeds on fear and grief. It cannot be defeated by power alone." Alara stepped forward. "Then we fight it with more than strength," she said. "We fight it with courage, hope, and trust, together." Valerian looked at her, surprised by her conviction. She was small, mortal, yet fearless in the face of forces that would have felled giants. He felt something stir within him, something human, something he thought long buried, admiration and something deeper. The boy raised a hand, and the mist around them shifted. Symbols appeared on the ground, glowing faintly like the runes in the castle chamber. "These mark the path," he said. "Follow them and you will confront the shadow, but beware, it will try to divide you, to turn your fears against you." Valerian rose, his expression fierce. "We will not falter," he said. No shadow can break us if we remain together. They followed the glowing runes, moving deeper into the forest. Every step was a trial. The trees seemed to whisper doubts, their shadows forming faces that mocked and tempted them. Valerian's senses detected illusions designed to separate them, to prey on their fears. At one point, Alara's reflection appeared in the shadows, crying and pleading, a mirror of her deepest guilt. She stumbled, but Valerian's hand gripped hers firmly. "Do not give in," he said. "Face the shadow with me, trust in us." Her heart steadied. She nodded, drawing courage from his unwavering presence. Together they pushed forward. Finally, they arrived at a clearing. In the center, a dark figure waited. It was taller than any mortal, its form shifting like smoke and shadow. Its eyes glowed silver, cold and unfeeling. The air around it thrummed with power, and the forest seemed to shrink back, giving the figure room to dominate. Valerian stepped forward, placing himself between Alara and the shadow. "Reveal yourself," he demanded. "No more games, no more shadows." The figure laughed, a sound that chilled the soul. "You are persistent, Vampire King," it said, "but persistence will not save you. You cannot undo what has been set in motion." Valerian's fists clenched. "I am not here to undo. I am here to protect, to fight, and to reclaim what is mine." The shadow swirled, moving closer, testing, taunting. "You have lost him already. His spirit is mine to command. Your grief feeds me. Your fear strengthens me." Valerian's eyes glowed brighter. "No more," he said, voice echoing with centuries of authority. "We face you as one, together." Alara stepped beside him, placing a hand lightly on his arm. "We do not fight with anger alone," she said. "We fight with love, hope, and courage. You will not divide us." The shadow recoiled slightly, then surged forward, its form expanding and twisting. Valerian and Alara moved as one, stepping into the circle of runes the boy had shown them. The air around them shimmered, charged with ancient magic. The shadow lashed out, striking at their minds, showing visions of loss, fear, and despair. Valerian saw his son, weeping and lost, and felt the weight of failure press on him. Alara saw herself, failing her promise, unable to protect the boy, consumed by guilt. But together they held their ground. Valerian's presence grounded them, his strength blending with her courage. The locket in her hand glowed, a tether to the boy's spirit, anchoring them to hope and love. "Now," Valerian commanded, his voice like steel, "bind it." Alara raised the locket, its glow brightening, and chanted softly, the words from the journal flowing naturally from her lips. Valerian added his voice, ancient and powerful, the sound vibrating through the clearing, echoing off the trees. The shadow shrieked, twisting violently as the light from the locket and their combined voices pressed against it. The dark form faltered, then split into smaller shadows, scattering into the mist. The forest seemed to exhale, releasing the tension that had hung like a heavy fog. Valerian fell to one knee, breathing hard, his senses still on alert. Alara placed a hand on his shoulder, steadying him. "It is weakened," she said softly, "but it is not gone. We must remain vigilant." He looked at her, truly seeing her for the first time, not as a servant, not as a protector of his son, but as an equal, a companion in courage and heart. His voice, low and uncertain, carried something he rarely allowed to surface. You are remarkable, Alara." She blushed slightly, though she did not break her composure. "We did this together," she said. "You do not give yourself enough credit. You faced darkness most could not even imagine." Valerian's eyes softened, the crimson glow fading slightly. For a moment he allowed himself to feel not as a king, but as a father, as a man, as someone who could be moved by loyalty, bravery, and trust. The boy's spirit appeared again, faint but shining. "Father, Alara, thank you," he whispered. "I am at peace, for now. But remember, shadows linger where hope is strongest. Be ready." Valerian nodded, his jaw firm. "We will be ready," he said, "together." As they made their way back through the forest, the night seemed quieter, though the mist still lingered. Their hands brushed, subtle yet charged, and neither pulled away. Something unspoken passed between them, a bond forged in grief, courage, and shared trials. The castle loomed ahead, its towers dark against the moonlit sky. The danger was not over. The shadow that had threatened them remained, waiting for another moment, another weakness. But Valerian and Alara had proven something vital. Together, they could face the darkness, and perhaps together they could find light even in the shadows. For the first time, Valerian allowed himself to imagine a future, not one dictated by fear or loss, but one where trust, hope, and perhaps even love could flourish amid the ruins of grief. And in the distance, hidden by mist and night, the shadow watched, patient, waiting, knowing the next confrontation would come. The bond between the vampire king and his mortal companion had grown, stronger than the fear, stronger than the darkness. But the night still held secrets, and the next chapter would test their hearts, their courage, and the fragile hope they had found together. The castle was silent, its towering spires lost in the gray light of dawn. Mist clung to the courtyard like a living thing, curling around the stone steps and walls. Within, Valerian stood at the center of the throne room, crimson eyes scanning every shadow, every corner. He had felt it, the lingering presence of the shadow that had haunted his son's final moments. Tonight, it would either be destroyed or claim what it sought. Alara approached quietly, her hand brushing against his arm. The warmth of her touch grounded him, reminding him of the courage and hope they shared. Together, they had survived the cursed forest, faced illusions designed to break them, and uncovered the truth behind the shadow's manipulations. Now, the final confrontation awaited. "Are you ready?" she asked softly. Valerian's gaze softened. "I have been ready for centuries," he said, though even he felt the weight of the coming battle. "But with you I am stronger. We face this together." The shadow stirred, unseen yet palpable, weaving through the halls like smoke. Its voice echoed in Valerian's mind, cold and cruel. "You cannot win. You are bound by flesh and blood, by love and hope. These will fail you." Valerian tightened his fists. "No," he said, his voice resolute. "Love and hope are not weaknesses, they are strength, and you will see that." Alara held the silver locket in her hand, its glow faint but steady. "We have the boy's blessing," she whispered, "and his memory will guide us. Remember that." Together, they moved to the central chamber, a room beneath the castle where the shadows seemed to gather with intent. The walls were carved with symbols older than the kingdom itself, and the air was thick with energy. Valerian traced the carvings with his fingertips, murmuring the incantations they had learned, while Alara began to chant the protective words she had studied. The shadow appeared, coalescing into a towering figure, its form flickering like smoke in a windless night. Its eyes, silver and unfeeling, bore into Valerian. "You are too late," it hissed. "Your grief, your loss, your hope, none of it matters." Valerian stepped forward, placing himself in front of Alara. "You are wrong," he said. "It matters more than you know. It gives us strength, courage, and reason to fight." The shadow lunged, its form twisting violently, striking at both of them. Valerian's hand glowed faintly as he deflected the blow, the force of centuries behind him. Alara's voice rose, chanting with power that resonated with the magic in the walls and the locket's soft glow. The two forces intertwined, forming a barrier of light and energy that held the shadow at bay. "You cannot bind me," it roared, voice shaking the chamber. "I feed on despair." Valerian's gaze softened as he looked at Alara. "We are not alone in despair," he said. "We have each other, and that is stronger than your darkness." Alara's chanting intensified. The locket's glow grew, illuminating the chamber with soft silver light. The shadow shrieked, recoiling as their combined strength pressed against it. It twisted, trying to break the barrier, but the bond between them was unyielding, anchored in courage, grief, hope, and trust. The boy's spirit appeared, luminous and gentle, hovering above the chamber floor. "Father, Alara, hold it together," he whispered. "The shadow can be ended, but only if you stand united. Do not let fear or guilt divide you." Valerian's hand reached for Alara's, and their fingers intertwined. For a moment, the world outside vanished. The shadow's attacks faltered as the connection between them pulsed with power. The locket's light shone brighter than ever, a tether to the boy's spirit, a symbol of love and protection that the shadow could not consume. The shadow wailed, twisting and contorting as the light pressed into it, forcing it to unravel. Its form shattered into fragments of darkness that scattered into the corners of the chamber, dissipating like mist under the morning sun. The air cleared, leaving only silence and the soft glow of the locket. Valerian fell to one knee, breathing heavily, his hand still holding Alara's. She knelt beside him, her own chest rising and falling with effort. The boy's spirit hovered between them, smiling faintly, radiating peace. "Father," the boy said softly, "it is over for now. The curse has been broken and the shadow weakened, but always remember, darkness waits where hope shines brightest." Valerian's eyes glistened. "I will remember," he whispered, "and I will protect you always. You will never face shadows alone again." Alara smiled faintly, brushing a hand across his cheek. "And you will not either," she replied. "You are not alone, Valerian, not anymore." The boy's spirit faded gradually, his form dissolving into silver light that mingled with the locket's glow. A sense of peace settled over the chamber, as if the very walls exhaled after centuries of tension. Valerian rose slowly, his hand still holding Alara's. The first rays of dawn crept into the chamber, casting long beams of light across the stone floors. The castle, once shrouded in shadow, now felt alive, as if it too had been reborn through their courage and unity. Alara looked up at him, her eyes reflecting the soft light. "Do you feel it?" she asked. "The burden is lighter. The grief, it is still here, but it does not weigh us down anymore." Valerian nodded. "Yes, the past cannot be undone, but it can be honored, and in honoring it we find strength to move forward." They walked through the castle together, the halls now welcoming rather than oppressive. Servants and guardians watched silently, sensing the change, the shift in the air, the aura of hope and strength that radiated from the king and his companion. In the courtyard, the sun rose fully, casting golden light over the castle's spires and the surrounding forest. Mist drifted in thin strands, but it no longer carried menace. Instead, it seemed to sparkle, as if the castle itself acknowledged their triumph. Valerian turned to Alara, his expression soft but determined. "The shadow may return," he said. "Darkness never truly leaves, but we are ready. Together, we are stronger than anything it can throw at us." Alara nodded, smiling. "We have already faced it and we survived. Whatever comes next, we will face it as one." He reached for the locket, now glowing softly in her hand. Holding it between them, he whispered, "This will remind us of what we have fought for, of what we protect. Not just the past, but the future we will create." She placed her hand over his, their fingers entwining once more. "And that future can be brighter than we ever imagined." For a long moment, they stood together in silence, feeling the warmth of the morning sun, the peace that came after the storm, and the bond they had forged through grief, courage, and love. The castle, once a place of shadow and sorrow, now felt like home, not just for Valerian, but for them both. Valerian's eyes softened as he looked at Alara, truly seeing her for the first time, not as a servant, not as a protector of his son, but as an equal, a companion, and something far more precious. "Alara," he said quietly, "you are extraordinary. Braver than I could have imagined and stronger than the darkness itself." She smiled, her hand still in his. "And you, Valerian, you are not just a king. You are someone who can love and be loved even after centuries of loss." The castle gates opened slowly in the soft morning light, and a breeze carried the faint scent of blooming flowers. It was a new day, a new beginning. Shadows had been faced, grief had been honored, and love had been allowed to grow. Yet even as the sunlight bathed the castle, somewhere in the distance, beyond the forest and hills, a faint shimmer of shadow lingered, a reminder that darkness never truly disappears. But Valerian no longer feared it. With Alara by his side, he was ready for whatever might come. Together they stood at the balcony, looking out over the kingdom, the wind tugging gently at their cloaks. The world was vast, mysterious, and still filled with danger, but for the first time it also held hope, love, and the promise of renewal. Valerian took a deep breath, feeling the weight of centuries lighten for the first time. "We have faced the shadows," he said, "and we have prevailed. Together nothing can break us." Alara leaned slightly against him, her voice soft but firm. "And together we will protect what matters most, not just the past but the future." The sun climbed higher, spilling light across the castle and forest. Mist lifted, birds sang, and life began anew. In the heart of the castle, in the hearts of its people, and in the hearts of two souls bound by courage and love, a new chapter began, a chapter where grief, loss, and darkness had been honored, and hope, redemption, and love could finally flourish. And somewhere in the distance, hidden yet no longer threatening, a shadow watched. But this time it knew the light would always return, stronger than the darkness.